and welcome back to In with Denoux.
Hey everybody, welcome back to In with Denoux featuring Jordan Shannon. We are continuing our conversation from last week, and we were talking about values, and it kind of bled into all these things about how Jesus treated people, how we love people, political things, things about the Second Amendment. So we're just going to jump right back in, and I'm going to toss it to Jordan, and we'll just keep going with the conversation that we ended last week.
Definitely, man. Like, yeah, it got me thinking around like the Second Amendment, that idea of like the rights around just having a gun or defending self or protecting self. I think it's so easy to latch onto that image of like the action of this is what it looks like, right? Like to have a gun, like someone's coming into my home, or someone is engaging in some really aggressive behavior, and so I want to stop them, kind of thing, right? And and I feel like that's a very harmful way of kind of looking at what it means to be action oriented. And that sermon that I shared about that I listened to on nonviolence and the way of the cross, the preacher, he had shared about like the differences between pacifists and pacifism, right?
Mm.
And he really stressed like Jesus was a pacifist, but he was not. That didn't mean that he was passive. He was
Right.
very aggressive in terms of how he dealt with people. Like he was not afraid to be strong and to be firm and to really speak the truth and stand on it and to defend himself, like in terms of like his eloquence, right? Like that was something that Jesus was not afraid of. Whereas when I feel like as people, we kind of lean into pacifism or think that being a pacifist means pacifism. And so
Right.
that means like being disengaged from the conversation or disengaged from the topic, and just kind of like retreating to our own silos or to our own bubbles around like our world of work, or let me invest in my career in this way, right? And that's not what Jesus wanted us to do. He didn't want us to retreat away
Right.
from those issues. I think what I had experienced growing up was, I think honestly, like being raised in Gainesville and being like it was great that I went to an all black church, but going to a school that was 90% white
Right.
and most of my friends being white, like I don't think really helped kind of mold those socializations for me. Cause I think
Sure.
I just saw like being in that school environment made me think, yeah, like let me just kind of adopt the colorblind thing and not see color and all
Mm.
these things. And it just created this divide, even just internally for me.
Right.
And because of that, right, like I think my mind growing up and even going off into college was like, I don't really want to talk about politics. I don't really want to talk about
Right.
racism or sexism or all these things. Like I just want to be about Jesus, right? Which is very much on brand for like just evangelical Christianity. Like
Yeah.
that's just very much like it's all about like let's just love Jesus and we'll keep the politics stuff out. And I don't think Jesus wanted us to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that actually helps us to really spread who he is, or to really
Right.
communicate all aspects of him. Because I think that teaches us to be passive and to be disengaged and to not lean in to people and their experiences and the systems that are affecting them.
Right.
Like and I think I just sat I really appreciated Sherwood's point around like pacifist versus passivism, because like I think in my mind I'm like, yeah, let me just kind of like keep my head down, do the work, do the things I gotta do. But if I'm
Right.
doing all those things and not really helping to change how these systems are hurting people or affecting people
Mm-hmm.
negatively, or even just listen to how those things are happening, then wouldn't you could make the argument I'm part of the issue. I'm part of the problem.
Sure.
I'm not helping to provide a solution. And frankly, Jesus would be like, I don't know you, right? Like
Mm.
that he would absolutely like condemn me for not being more concerned or more well read or just active about addressing some of these socio-political issues. And I think we're afraid to address those things because maybe they're so entrenched to personal experiences, to family philosophies, cultural dynamics. I think those are a lot of reasons why we are like hesitant about engaging, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't engage in it, right? Like
Right.
I think that us not engaging in it leads to a lot of the isolation, the divide, and honestly, the pride that we see growing up. Like people
Yeah.
think that, oh yeah, my way of viewing the world is right, and if you challenge it, then you're an idiot, kind of thing. And
Right.
it really needs to be this space of just saying like, no, like I I may not know everything about this topic or this issue, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn how it also affects me. It affects others who look like me. It affects those who are not like me, who don't reflect my experiences. And how
Yeah.
can we help address that to make this space more healing or more? How can I show Jesus's love through that, right? And
Right.
provide those responses, speaking truth, but also also being gracious, right? Like so I feel like I'm going all over the place, but I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about that with regards to rights and activism, or just action oriented.
Sure.
And you know, our vision of being action oriented is like, let me pull out a gun, or let me show my strength, or let me,
Yeah.
like let me physically show my capabilities in being able to defend. And it's like,
Mhm.
is that what Jesus really wanted of us? I don't think so. I think reality is we are quick to defend, maybe because we're scared
Sure.
deeply of something being taken from us in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's so interesting because like I love this conversation and like just for the content of it in terms of what we're talking about, but also like we do want to stay true to, like, we don't want to be scripted. We want to just this is our friendship. This is the things we talk about and we'll have fun episodes and stuff as well, but I think this hard topic stuff is important and talking about values and pride and violence and things of that nature. I think they like we keep coming back to this word pride and like I said it in the last episode is that I think all these things root itself in pride and I think it's the reason for what you're saying this need to feel like we need to protect ourselves and that we don't trust, we are fearful, we're afraid of what we might lose, of what someone might take from us, all these things. And I think it bleeds into all the things that we've talked about over last episode and so far in this episode. And it's just interesting because I do think it bleeds into like I feel like we're kind of like dipping our toe into the race conversation and like I think that you know really like everything that has to do with the race divide in our country, I think also stems in pride and in this need to
Yeah,
show
yeah.
dominance or whatever it may be. But I think, and I don't mean that
Oh
just
yeah,
now. I mean that like
absolutely,
from the beginning
absolutely.
of our nation, right? And I think that that conversation is so important, especially with us being best friends and you being black and me being white. I think it's important conversations that need to be had. And like we're talking about boldness, and I think we need to be bold and talk about, those things as well. And so I just know like from the bit that you talked about in terms of growing up in an all black church, going to a school that was majority white, and I can share a lot of my experiences and my stories so that we've talked a lot about offline. Um, but I think that that is a interesting dynamic, especially in a place like Gainesville. Like most people probably only know Gainesville because of the University of Florida. I mean, rightfully,
Oh yeah,
rightfully so.
yeah.
But I think
There ain't
that
nothing else besides the university.
yeah, yeah, and I think that if you took the university out of Gainesville, it is a white and it that I learned from one of our friends, Keandra, who used to be a school teacher there, and
Mhm. Yeah,
she
yeah.
taught on the east side of Gainesville, and she let me know that it's the most racially divided school system in the state of Florida, which I
Wow.
didn't know. But it's not super surprising if you really look at Gainesville outside of the university, because you go to the university, it's like a melting pot. It feels like you're in South Florida.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
as soon as you step outside of the confines of the school and you kind of go a little north, a little east, a little any direction, away from the school, you're like, okay, this is a country town. you know, and I think, you know, you grew up there and kind of know more of the ins and outs of that. And so I think that these conversations that we're having, and especially how they deal with race, is important. And so I don't know if you want to speak more on that, and I'm happy to share. You know, I think our upbringings, and even though we both grew up in Florida, like you growing up in Gainesville and me growing up in South Florida, they are like different states. So like you said in
Yeah,
the
they are
last
different
episode,
things. They are,
yeah, like
they
in the
are,
last
man. Like
episode. Sorry, go ahead.
they are, man. Like it's so funny because I was just listening to, I was listening to who was I listening to? Yin Yang Twins. Because you know they have music that they collaborate with Trick Daddy on. So I was just listening to it. I'm like, man,
I didn't think they'd
and
make it
I
into the podcast.
they're at one song their song "What's Happening." It's a hype song. I love it. But they said Miami, and I just remember thinking, dang it, I'm not from Miami. I feel like a phony. Like just thinking it. But it's a good song. But I share that just to show like from being from North Florida and like South Florida, completely different states. Like they're
Yeah.
completely different areas and in Gainesville in particular, it's interesting because my mom works in the school system and has worked in the Alachua County school system for three decades. Like she's been immersed in that, and I never even thought to ask her about the racial makeup, but just one like from Counter's perspective, wow, like and it fits
Yeah.
just because like but so like from my experience like going to PK which was a feeder school to the university it was supposed to make the demographics that reflected the state, but it still unfortunately like meant that like they had quotas for how like folks got in, and now it's generally done through lottery system. But I think back in the day when I applied, like you had to go through an application process, and if your siblings were already got accepted there, it increased your likelihood of getting accepted there.
Right.
But that experience was hard for me to reconcile like race. Like I obviously knew I was black. Like I knew I was like racially I looked different. I looked very, very different from my white peers. But I also just struggled with like how much do I like what about my experiences do I need to center, and how do I make sense of that? Like being in this space that's predominantly white, my teachers are white. Like how am I supposed to make sense of all of this? And then I go to a church in a community and spend a lot of my after school time in a community that does not reflect my school.
Right.
Like which is a good experience for me to have. Like it's good for me to grow up, like to spend time with more black kids and just get to know them, connect with them, really stay connected to the culture. Like it's very important to do that. But I think for myself, like I think I had a difficult time really just understand. I did feel like there was a clashing of worlds.
Sure.
And this was even evident within even my extended family. My extended family is from Tampa, St. Pete, and they grew up on the south side of St. Pete, which is predominantly black at the time. Like right now it's becoming a little bit more gentrified, but like back then, like it was largely black. And so like all my cousins, all my extended family, like black. Like so I would see them during the summer. I would spend summers down there. So to go from those spaces into my school, it felt like I got like master classes in code switching. And I feel like my siblings, all of us know how to navigate white spaces pretty well.
Sure.
But we also like, I think my sister, not so much because I think my sister just had different experiences because differences in age. But my brother and I being closer in age, I just remember us like, almost like when our mom would bring up stuff around like race, we almost like shrugged her off. We almost was like, don't talk about that with us. Like that's not us. You know, like we ain't got to worry about that. Almost like just like, I'm not black, I'm OJ kind of thing, right? Like we thinking like just because we play sports and we do athletics, we don't have to talk about blackness. And there's like stuff about that. It's like psychology around that. But I think in my mind, I was just like, that's how I was making sense of the world. It's like not really taking serious heed about the fact that no, like racism does have an impact, a negative impact on me,
Right.
and I need to have a space where I need to like understand that, reflect on that, and get to know what that means.
Right.
Um, and it was awkward. I remember it being so awkward in elementary school where I would have white friends, white male friends, who genuinely would ask if they could say the N word to me.
Mm.
Um, and being one
Crazy,
of the
bro.
few, me being one of the few black, and they always wanted to say it in a way that was like, like in reference to a Trick Daddy song or reference to stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But it was like I remember sitting in those things and thinking to myself, I was like, why are you asking me that? And I didn't feel strong enough to say no, you can't say that. Like I would just be like,
Right.
yeah, y'all. I almost tried to shrug it off like as a comic thing of like, well, y'all made up the word, so yeah, say it. I don't care, like kind of thing. But the
Sure.
reality, that's how I kind of that
That's a crazy question to ask, bro.
I felt like it was a survival tactic for me, man. Like it
Yeah.
was like a way of just like I don't want to ruffle feathers. I just am trying to be here, and if you want to say that, we're fine. Like I don't care. Even
Mm.
though secretly I was like, every time I used it, I cringed a lot. Like I was like, why are you saying that to me? Right?
Yeah.
Like so and then growing up and spending time with more of my black friends, they'd be like, y'all they'd be like, we ain't let white boys say that stuff to us. It's like, what's wrong with you? Like, don't let people
Yeah.
say that to you. So that helped. But I just remember like having that struggle within myself of like being in these environments, being at these schools, and like almost just really just having to navigate and code switch two different worlds because of that.
Yeah.
And I think that contributed a lot to just my own sense of like mental health and stuff like that. Like I think
Mm.
like the stuff that I may have now with like my own aspects of depression and things like I think a lot of that can be traced back to my elementary and middle school experiences.
Sure. Sure.
Just like all of us. Right. But I think that the the oh snap. I'm getting passionate, my camera fell. But I think the aspect of just the race piece specifically in my own race identity, it took a long time. It took a long time for me to really come to the space of like saying like no, like I gotta be more comfortable challenging and having those conversations and I haven't spoken to those types of those friends in years. Like
Mm-hmm.
but if I were to have those conversations, or I were to see them again, and they want to talk like that, or they want us to say like, "Hey, what's up?" I'd be like, "Hey, you can't say that to me," right? Like
Right.
in actuality, we might actually fight if they say that to me at this point.
Right.
Just
Right.
because I would think after everything that they've seen in the media and stuff, I would think you would have the acknowledgement and the awareness to know that that's not okay. Stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And if anything, should issue an apology for asking to say that.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, yes, yes.
That's wild.
That would be dope though, dog. Like I'm just thinking about like imagine if like they were to be like, hey, I know we asked this when we were 8. I'm sorry. Like I'd be like,
Yeah.
wow, like that is huge. And that to me is like that's the humility we were talking about, right? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
that's the space of saying like, yeah, I shouldn't be asking that of you, like in any way, and I shouldn't have thought that that was ever going to be okay. Even if like the way you use it or anything like that, I shouldn't have thought that that was going to be okay. you know?
Yeah. 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 Bro, I appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable with that, because I know something that, some people might look at and, and I know we've, laughed a little during this time, but that's like traumatizing for you,
Oh
in a
yeah.
way. And so, especially during that time when you reflect back to how you were feeling, that you even said, I just want to make sure I'm not misquoting you, but like that it was like a defense mechanism, almost like a
Oh yeah.
survival tactic, I
Hands down.
think you said, which is sad, that is what it needed to be for you,
Yeah.
So it's crazy, but I appreciate this conversation. And I think that something I've learned as I've gotten older is that white America, we need to listen. Like when Jordan is saying something like that, I need to listen. But I do think it's important for like both sides of the coin to share and then figure out the differences together. And I hope that Jordan and I can help promote that, because I think these conversations are important. And I think listening, especially on the white side of America, is super important. And it's just so interesting because, my upbringing was just so different. Being, again, like we said, Central Florida, North Florida, and South Florida are just completely different places. And growing up in South Florida in this melting pot, those things still happen down there. They're just not quite as obvious sometimes. But it's just crazy because something that, we had this conversation a couple weeks ago offline. And, as I've gotten older and able to do the work and learn about these things and learn what I was ignorant to as a younger man and the things that I need to learn, the conversations that I need to have, the listening that I need to do, I think that has taught me a lot of important lessons, and even been able to look at my upbringing and see, man, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for that. Man, I wish I had seen that earlier in life. Because the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago was that so many of the mentors and the men that are important to me that have become brothers, big brothers to me, are Black. And so I think that was so important to me, to where even though there were so many things I didn't know and things that I needed to learn and I wish I had learned earlier in life, there's still so much power in that, because I think that it's something you quite frankly don't see often, is a young white kid with mentors that are Black men, that are a few years older, unfortunately. And it benefited me so much, and those men still mean the world to me today. I think about specifically the three that I think of is Jeff Boys, who's my big brother, Matt Blair and Nashawn Blair, who are brothers, and they took me under their wing. They are the ones that taught me about the scriptures. They're the ones that studied the Bible with me. They're the ones that, taught me basketball in a lot of ways and were really hard on me. Like I said in the last part, I had little man syndrome, and they're all really tall. And so they took it extremely hard on me, So I would go play basketball with them like every week, and they would just take it hard on me. And I remember, I think it was Matt pulled me aside one day, and Matt now is like, 6'6". He's huge, and I'm like 5'8", and now I'm 5'8". Then I was not 5'8". And he would tell me, he's like, hey, the reason we take it so hard on you is that when you go into middle school tryouts, when you go into high school tryouts, you will be able to handle the pressure, because we're not going to take it easy on you. We're older than you. We're bigger than you. We're stronger than you now, and probably, forever. They're forever going to be bigger and stronger than me. But, it helped me mentally to not be afraid of a full court press, to be afraid of someone 6 inches taller than me coming down on me, type of things. And like we kind of talked about in episode 1, how like things that aren't that important, like sports, become something that's important. Same with those relationships. Like it kind of started for me with basketball, and I respected them because they were good at basketball and whatnot. But it really became this brotherhood where, especially with Jeff, to where, something I was telling you a couple weeks ago is that when I would go hang out with Jeff, when we would go play basketball, do whatever, we'd meet people playing basketball, and they'd be like, oh, like, how do you guys know each other? And before I could say anything, Jeff would be like, this is my little brother. Like immediately he'd be like, this is my little brother. And that like meant the world to me. Like I have an older sister, but I've never had a, biological brother. And so he always looked out for me. He always protected me. He always taught me, he was the one every Sunday at church, maybe not every Sunday, but many Sundays. He's just like, hey man, like when you're ready to study the Bible, I got you. Like I'll teach you, kind of thing. And, I love him for that, and will forever love him for that. And so I think that played a big role. And although, there's still so many things that I was unaware of or naive to in terms of race, I think that what it caused was when things happen in the world, when things, that affect the Black community happen, when I see those things on the news or I hear about them happening in someone's personal life, those are the faces that I put to those actions, if that makes sense. Like when I see, and I don't want to blanket, I don't want to be a blanket statement of saying that like all police are bad or whatever, but there is a very negative relationship between the police and Black America. And so when you see these things on the news, I think, man, like that's what Jeff's having to go through. That's what Matt's having to go through. That's what Nashawn's having to go through. That's what Jordan's having to go through. And I think like having those relationships that mean so much to me help me to want to learn more. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I think that lots of times the ignorance of, you know, race relations in America, uh, I would say the biggest component of that is people not willing to put in the work to learn our history of the
Oh
country,
yeah.
to learn, you know, we weren't properly taught in school, if I do say so myself, the true history of our country. It was very whitewashed. And so I think being able to do some of that work, not that I've done like, you know, all this crazy extensive work, but being able to study these things and see these things and hear people's experiences has really changed my life and how I look at things. And I
Mhm.
think during the pandemic, something that really was heartbreaking but eye opening at the same time, you know, there was so much going on in 2020 with the pandemic, and then all these things happened, and it felt like the country was just on the edge of like a race war almost. Like maybe that's a little strong, but maybe not. And I think when everything happened with George Floyd, we, as a church community down in South Florida, at the time where I was on staff at the church there, like I've talked about, working with the teens. And so we had a Zoom call after all that happened. And basically, it was a Zoom call where people could just openly share their experience about race in America. And I hopped on the call, and I had decided before I went in, like, I'm not going to say anything. I just want to jump in and I want to listen and hear what people's experience, people that I know, you know, that I go to church with, that I work with on a day to day basis, that I knew since I was a little kid in some cases, and to hear some of the responses and to never know, like, if it wasn't for that call, like having never known they had gone through that was just
Yeah.
heartbreaking. It was just heartbreaking to me. And I think was very eye opening and made me want to look deeper into the history of this country and hear people's experiences. And at the same time, like, I'm not just saying, like, as a white man hearing what black men and women have gone through, although that's mostly what I mean, but also like from other races and, you know,
Yep.
white people as well. Like, what do you think about this? Why do you think about things this way? You know, where did you learn that kind of thing? And just kind of dive deep. It made me want to have conversations. And I think that's why in this podcast, I want it to be, you know, open and honest. And again,
Yeah.
especially because we are, you know, a white man and a black man and great friends, I think it's important to set an example in that way, to be able to have open dialogue and learn from each other, and hopefully people learn from us. So that was kind of my experience, and kind of what helped spark why I wanted to learn more. And it was, as you know, as an adult, you know, there was things that I never thought about as a kid. And it's funny, I even thought back, you know, during that time, I thought back on a story that I always thought back as like a funny story. And when I look back on it, I'm like, maybe that wasn't a funny, maybe they don't look at that as a funny story, you know, because I remember one time
Mhm.
after church being in the car, and Matt was driving, Jeff was in the passenger seat, and me and Nishan, Matt's brother, were in the back seat. And I remember Nishan was kind of like a goofball, you know, he was always like the one making everybody laugh and whatnot. And so he had put this like mask on, you know, that just had like the eyes cut out and the mouth cut out or whatever. And he was just messing around or whatever. And I remember Matt like looking back, and he was like, what are you doing? Like, we're three black men and we have this like this little white kid in the car, like, take that mask off, you know. And maybe it was funny for them, but I
Mhm.
think back on that and I'm just like, you know, to have to think in that way, regardless of whether it was a joke or not, like,
Right. Right.
that
Yeah.
is an
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of like how white America and black America unfortunately have to think differently. And so,
Oh yeah.
you know, I think back on times like that. I think back on the time, I don't know if you remember this, of us in Gainesville in your car. Do you remember this? Looking for a field for
Oh.
football practice?
Oh snap! Yeah, what
Yeah.
we got pulled
So,
over, right? It was outside Norman Hall. Yeah,
yeah, it was just a weird situation. And I think, like, you know, it was, you were driving, I believe Travell was with us, and
yeah, that's right. So that
myself
was
and Jordan Huff. I think it was Jordan Huff, Travell, you and myself. And basically what was happening was, in Gainesville, which again we've kind of talked about, is like a smaller campus town. You know, if you take the campus out, it's just a very, very small city. And it was during winter break when a lot of the students had left, and we were looking for we had gone to a field that we normally use for football practice, but because the school was closed for winter break, the lights didn't come on. So we were parked at Flavette Field, a field on University of Florida's campus, and we went there early. That's why we were the only ones there. We went there early just to like throw around, warm up. And our coach Bryce, we called him because we were like, "Hey Bryce, like the lights aren't on at the field. Should we drive around and try to find another field?" So it was just us parked at this field, and there was a police officer parked there too. So we pulled out and we drove to another field to see if there was lights on in that field. And the cop like followed us, and then the lights weren't on at that field. So we went to go check a third field, and basically eventually he pulled us over, and it was just a weird conversation, you know? And, you know, I think about situations like that, like, and so I think that just thinking back on those things and having a different perspective now as an adult, or I guess I was an adult then, but I guess as an older man now, than I was then, and just seeing those things with different eyes, and just, you know, can't imagine that feeling that you were in that moment, that Travell was in that moment, Jordan was in that moment, was so different than how I was experiencing it. So, yeah.
Feel that, man. And as you were sharing, I was like, damn, that did happen. Because you know what's interesting, when you were sharing the story with Nashawn and Matt and Jeff, I was actually thinking about like an experience I had when I was in Jersey. So this was like 2015. Same thing. Four of us brothers. I was actually dropping off the evangelist's kid, my boy Javi. I was dropping him off at his place. And it was like a full car. I had the Honda, but it was like 5 of us in the car, like 3 brothers in the back, one ride shotgun. But all of us was black. Javi's Puerto Rican, and I dropped Javi off, and there's like 2 cop cars right outside his home, and they just follow me and pull us over, and it's like midnight. So, and people were like, "Oh, it's New Jersey's law to have 2 cops like show flashlights at a car." I was like, really? Like, that's the expectation? Like, when I explained this to my classmates, like, later that year, I remember they were trying to explain it off. But I just remember thinking, like, at midnight, now the car is just 4 black guys in the car. And it's a Honda Accord, and got one cop who's flashing a light on me, and another cop flashing a light on my friend sitting in the passenger side. And I was just, like, thinking, like, can we just go home, man? I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like, but no arrest. I remember he said vividly, he said, "Oh, you look suspicious back there," you know. So I just wanted to make sure that y'all weren't getting into any funny business. I was like, "Sir, I just dropped off the evangelist kid from my church. Just going home." and I had to drop, like, one of the brothers was my roommate, so I wanted to take us home, but I had to drop off these 2 other brothers at their house. So I was like, I have to drop them off, and then I need to go home. It is midnight. I'm tired.
Right.
But it was just that kind of, like, you know, like, I feel like that's part of the sad reality is, like, when those lights come on, you don't know what is going to happen, right? Like, I had my ID ready, like, I had all that stuff ready, and I know, because of my upbringing and experiences, I do know how to, again, I know how to navigate white spaces, so I can say all the
sure
yes sir, no sir kind of stuff, even though in my spirit I'm like, how'd you pull me over? Give me my stuff back. Let me go. Right? Like, that's how I'm really feeling in those moments. And it is important for us to have this conversation, just because, like no one really, like, we just don't always make space for those things. I don't know if you saw this on social media, or you heard about this on social media. You had mentioned George Floyd, like, right? Like, and we just passed the 5-year anniversary of his death, right? And like, maybe have you heard about the Shiloh Hendrix campaign and the Carmelo Anthony situation? Not Carmelo Anthony, the basketball player. I have to clarify.
So I have heard, but I'm not very familiar.
Okay, I can give you a quick gist of it, because it's been something that's been on my mind, and I've been constantly, like, having conversations about. But so Carmelo Anthony is a young black teen. He was at a track meet, and these two
Yes,
twin
the
brothers
knife.
came up to him, and yeah,
Yes,
he
yes. Okay.
stabbed one of the brothers, and the brother
Yeah.
died, and so he actually just got charged with first degree murder. But people like he claimed self defense, and so like
Right.
he was raising his family asked for legal support, like they started a fundraiser campaign that was like raising money for a strong legal support, right?
Hmm.
Because legal cases can be expensive, you
Sure.
need break. So made perfect sense. Shiloh Hendrix, to contrast that situation, Shiloh Hendrix is a white woman in Rochester, Minnesota, and she was caught slurring a black child, a 5-year-old black boy. She used the N word against him
Hmm.
because she said that he was going through going through her purse and taking snacks from her baby boy, and she had like a 1-year-old with her. Um, so and so a man recorded her while he's like, "Hey, did you just use the N word against a child?" And she even repeats herself saying it. She doesn't slur the child in that
Wow.
moment, but he slurs the man, the black man recording. So it's pretty evident, like based off that, like okay, she likely said that word, right?
Yeah.
Well, she started a fundraising campaign around like saying like, "Hey, help me support my family, protect my family,"
Hmm.
and so many people donated to her campaign. She's raised over $800,000
Wow.
for that,
That's
whereas
crazy.
Carmelo Anthony raised 500,000, and the way it was framed from white people who had donated or claimed to donate or who were trying to explain it was that like they explained it as like um they explained it as like it's almost like these are competing GoFundMe's, like white people are supporting this white woman and
Hmm.
then black people are supporting black, and it's like no, they're not. That's not how these are framed. It's really just a racist act. And here's the kicker of how I found out. Like, I mean, I always suspected it was racist just because of like you're supporting a white woman for calling a black boy the N word. That's like that's racist. Like,
Sure.
let's just.
Sure.
But here's where it kind of got to a head. Someone went viral on social media for the term black fatigue. And, when I first heard the term black fatigue, I thought, oh, that must mean, black people experiencing fatigue of just like navigating life through racism. Like, I'm thinking
Sure.
that's what it was. But no, what it was is it was this white woman saying, like, we've had it with all the ghetto-ness, the ratchetness, black
Hmm.
people. We've had it with all of this. And it's like, oh, that's what you meant by black fatigue. So you are literally tired of black people. Like,
Yeah.
that's what that translated to. And it was kind of scary of how that like went viral and kept going and kept getting support. But that was essentially the rationale behind why people donated to Shiloh Hendrix's campaign.
Right.
And that to me, when I heard that and I saw that, I was just like, we really supported this woman's right to be racist and gave her 800. Y'all really gave her $800,000, and
Right.
y'all basically are doubling down by saying you're tired of black people.
Right.
So how am I as a black man
Hmm.
supposed to live my life and think that racism does not affect me when I literally see y'all making millionaires of white people for using this stuff or doing this
Yeah.
stuff or engaging in these things, right? And not to mention the black boy who was slurred, like he's not getting any family support or
Right.
he's not getting any like support from his trauma or hurt or anything that nature, right? Like so there's a lot of like I guess complexities around it, but at the end of the day, it was this evidence of like, wow, like if racism, like white people want to support racism in this way, and this
Hmm.
is how they're going to support it, even if like a black man, a black boy is, just wanting to raise money for legal defenses and things of that nature, they will find a way to say, why is the stabber like out on bail, or why is he
Right.
getting money? We're supporting our own here, right? Like so
Right.
I found myself feeling like so frustrated, but also just like that's where I can feel my own black fatigue showing up of like, yeah, I'm tired of just living through racism. And this is an example. Like it was like a confirmation of the actual like academic term of black fatigue, which that was written about in 2020, but that's another sidebar for another day. But it was just this idea of like how like racism continues to manifest in these conversations, right? Like and even you can use it as a platform to build $1 million. You can become a millionaire from being racist if you're white. Like literally, you could become a millionaire. Like I couldn't think of a more like visible like example. So
yeah, man. And it's crazy because like I think that the problem that a lot of people have is that they can't separate the fact that in both those cases, right? Like regardless of the person being in the right or being in the wrong, right? Like that's not, obviously that's the point for their individual cases and the families involved. But like as a broader thing, like that's not really the point that you're making. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course, it could have been handled differently than the boy stabbing the other boy or whatever. Yeah. But like that's not the point of like that's people will get stuck on that. And I understand like the families involved and stuff, like that's all of what it's about. But what you're talking about, people can't separate like right and wrong in two different forms, if that makes sense. Yeah. And man, it's just crazy.
Justifying. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was saying I saw people justifying of like saying like, well, he stabbed a woman, so I think stabbing is worse than a word or stuff like that. And it's like that's not the point of either of these, right? Like it's actually been very clear. And if you're making that the point, then you are contributing to the racism that is happening. Like, because you're basically saying if black folks are convicted of a crime or are alleged or arrested for a crime, that they shouldn't have due process and that they should not get support for legal defenses. Like they should just be presumed guilty and not innocent. Whereas this white woman, we can catch her on tape engaging in some hateful acts. Yeah. And not only is she not going to get arrested or get any penalized, we're going to reward her. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? We're going to actually reward her for this. You know, yeah.
Yeah. And it's crazy, man, because you know this, we've talked about this offline, but it just confirms to me that it's like we haven't come as far as we would like to think we have, you know? Yeah. Because I've been I'm reading this book right now, and I told you, so just so everybody knows, a big reason why I feel like this podcast became a thing and why, you know, I've shared that I was a minister and, you know, I wanted to challenge myself in a new way. So I stepped out of that role, but I've been really missing teaching people about God and the things that I know. And I feel like God has gifted me with the talent to teach people about the scriptures. And I was listening to a podcast while I was driving, and the podcast was about this book that I'm now reading. I just started reading it, called The Barn. And it's about the story of Emmett Till, which if you don't know who Emmett Till is, shame on you, you should know. But and I had heard his story 100 times, you know, in the past. But this author, he's a white man, but he was raised in the area where the murder happened in Mississippi. And if you don't know who Emmett Till is, it was a murder that happened back in the 50s, I believe. A young black boy from Chicago who was visiting family in Mississippi and catcalled to a white woman. And he was 13, I believe, 13 or had just turned 14. And he catcalled, he was sitting outside of a store and like whistled at a white woman that he thought was pretty or whatever. And her husband and friends or whatever kidnapped him, murdered him, and threw him in the river. That's the short version. But I was listening to this podcast of this man who wrote a book called The Barn, and it's basically this barn that's kind of been somewhat erased from history, and it's where the murder actually happened. You know, he was found in a river, but he was actually murdered at this barn, and it was kind of written out of the story to protect the person who owned the barn, basically. And I was listening to this guy, Pablo Torre, who used to be on ESPN, who has a great podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out. And I'm sure he'll never hear this, but if he does, shout out Pablo Torre. But he does this investigative journalism show. and he had this author on, and they're talking about the book, and it's one of the most powerful podcast episodes I've ever listened to, so I highly recommend it. But towards the end of the episode, the guy who wrote the book, whose name is escaping me right now, but he was talking about, he didn't say that he was an atheist or anything like that, but it kind of seemed like he was an atheist or an agnostic. And towards the end of the episode, he's talking about how he was interviewing the last person still alive who knew Emmett Till personally, and I believe it was his cousin, who is now a pastor in a church. And one of the things he said that really stirred me, that made me want to start teaching people about God again in a different way, and in a lot of ways start this podcast, was he was saying, you know, if I learned anything through this story is that there is a higher power. And he didn't necessarily say God, but he kind of hinted at God. And the reason he said it was the way this man who knew Emmett Till and knew the things that happened to him, the crazy scenario in which he was killed, and the sad nature in which he was killed, and was still able to have forgiveness and have grace and speak about it in like a way that was the way the guy put it was, the only answer is that there was a higher power that was guiding his life, because there's no way someone could speak that gracefully, especially if you know all the details of the murder. It was crazy, and it was a murder that in a lot of ways sparked the civil rights movement. And I believe Rosa Parks said like she was thinking about Emmett Till when she wouldn't move from her seat on the bus, like things like that, things that like, you know, rippled through history. And so I would definitely recommend checking out that podcast. But I say that to say that you bring up this situation that happened recently, and it's like, you know, I feel like we have all these rappers coming up in this podcast, but I think it was Kanye that was like, you know, saying how racism is still alive. It's just, they're just concealing it, you know? And I think that that's what it's become in our world today, is that it really hasn't changed that much. It's just not as socially acceptable anymore. So, you know, you might not see something like a murder like Emmett Till's, but you see it come up with someone making a ton of money off of racist comments, you know? So, but yeah, that podcast, you know, affected me in a major way, even having known the story and hearing these details I had never heard. And now I'm reading the book, and the book is called The Barn. And so I'll definitely give an update when I get further along in the book. But
for sure.
Yeah.
It got me even thinking about, like, I don't know if you heard about this other instance that just happened. So there was the Nottoway plantation home. It was in Louisiana. It's like I want to say it's like maybe an hour or two. I don't know the geography of Louisiana that well, but you would. I think it's not too far from. I think it's like south of Baton Rouge.
Okay.
But it was the largest plantation home in the South. Like it was the largest, and it recently burned down. Like it recently just got set on fire. Like no one knows why it happened. Like I'm sure they've probably been able to do some kind of like digging and more investigation, or I think the investigation is ongoing, so it might have changed by the time this comes out. But no one had found out. But what you saw on social media that cracked me up was you just saw like a lot of like memes around like black folks being at a cookout right outside the plantation as it burned down. and I just loved it. I was like, I loved every single minute of it. I loved all the memes, because I'm like, that's right. And what was happening, and in some ways, like that rejoicing was like that was genuine. But then what happened outside of that was the responses of the backlash of like, oh gosh, this is where we have to have those tough conversations again. Because what I saw was from like people who grew up in the South who were white. There was a lot of like, no, our history's being destroyed, or no, like, we were planning to be able to have our wedding there, or no, like all these things. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Do you understand what this place represented? Like, yeah, the property is burned down. Like, that's not good. It's a damage, loss of property. But that place held hundreds of slaves and enslaved folks who worked that land.
Right.
And now people can rent it out for weddings. You know,
Yeah.
like, we don't think
Yeah.
about how odd that is, right? Like, it even made me think about, like, in Gainesville with Hale Plantation, right? Like,
Yeah.
and Hale Village. Like, I don't recall going to a wedding there. But I also remember working in Hale. You know, like, I worked at that restaurant in Hale.
Yeah.
For 3 years. So I just, but it even at that time, this is how I knew, like, my race wasn't as salient to me. My racial identity wasn't as salient to me. I didn't even think about it that much. Like, I was like, I grew up next to Hale Plantation, like, the big behind sign, you know, like, it's the ritziest part. Like, my neighborhood's literally right next door to it.
Yeah.
And yet my mind was just kind of like, I was just kind of like indifferent. Now, looking back on myself now, it's like, dang, that was not okay. And they should not be having people being able to have weddings or book venues or anything like this. Like, this should not be celebrated in the way that it is celebrated, right? Like, this land, we could go so far as to say, like, land could be redistributed. Like, we could get really radical, but it's like, this is really, like, not okay. And yet, folks, and this is where it is. It comes back to, like, all aspects of, like, looking at greater systemic, like, issues, right? Like, or systematic issues. Because it's like, okay, if we were to, like, try to give the land back, right? How do you divide that up and take that away from families and all these different things, right? Like it becomes very complex and it becomes very challenging. And people ain't gonna want to just willingly give those things up, even though that would be the right thing to do based out of history, right? Like, so I say all that to say, like, with the plantation burning down, right? Like, you saw a lot of, like, Black joy of, like, yeah, that's right. But then you also saw a lot of, like, white folks, like, seeing, like, this, like, oh gosh, I hope that doesn't happen to any other places, or I hope that, like, we're able to have our wedding at this place, or, oh no, like, our history is not being preserved. And it's like, whoa, how can you want to be attached to a history where you owned people and treated them like property?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why you would want to have that connection to that history, but I do think it speaks to something you said earlier, which is this aspect of just dominance, right? Like, this aspect of just wanting to have this control or have this authority that really was never meant to be used in this way, or I'll say this, not never meant to be used in this way, but was meant to be used in this way. But now we are fighting back because we recognize how oppressive and how harmful it was for all these years, right? Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. And, like, you bringing up the plantation in Louisiana made me think about the reason Jordan's saying I might know the geography a little better is because my dad was born and raised in Louisiana, and I'm a huge LSU fan. And I never lived there, but I've been there several times. And it's interesting because the podcast that I brought up that was about Emmett Till in this book called The Barn, a couple of weeks ago, my dad and I drove down to South Carolina and went to a LSU South Carolina baseball game. And on the ride back, it's about an hour and a half drive from Charlotte to Columbia, South Carolina. So on the ride back, I asked him if he would be interested in listening to that podcast. And it's about 50 minutes long or something like that. So I was just kind of curious what he would think, and it was just kind of cool to share that with my dad, who, you know, obviously is an older white man, and he's, you know, he'll be 74 next month, and he grew up in Louisiana, so that made me think about when you brought up this plantation, and so we listened to it, and he loved the podcast, and it was just kind of cool to talk to him about these things, you know, like I hadn't really talked to my dad about, like, all this stuff I'm talking about doing this research and learning on my own and listening to people, hearing people's experience. I hadn't really been able to, like, talk to my family a lot about this stuff. And a lot of that is just distance and things like that. But being here for a little bit with my family, I was like, this is a good opportunity to, like, listen to this, see what my dad thinks. So we had about 40 minutes or so of the drive left after the episode was over, and him and I are talking. And there's just things I kind of learned that I'd never heard before about his life growing up in Louisiana. And I've
Mhm.
heard a lot of stories of like when he was a kid and things like that. But he was telling me I didn't realize, and in the podcast they talk about how in Mississippi the schools didn't integrate until 1970, which is crazy. And apparently my dad, when he said that in the podcast, my dad was like, it was the same in Louisiana. And my dad actually graduated high school in 69. So it was the year before they integrated. But my uncle is a little younger, so he went through the integration. But my dad was telling me, he was saying that his senior year of high school, there was 12 black students that went to his high school. And
Mhm.
again, this is before it was integrated. And he was saying, which this in of itself is really sad, to be honest. But at the same time, I feel like those 12 students must have been probably the strongest mentally of anyone in that school, because they were, the way my dad would put it was that they were students who were uh, like specifically brought in because of their either their athletic ability, they played an instrument, like things like that.
Mhm.
Like, they were very good at something specific, which
Mhm.
is kind of sad to be honest.
Yeah.
That was the only reason. But yeah, to just kind of hear that and his perspective and things of that nature was interesting for me. I think was good for me, and I think good for him too. Um, but it just made me think of that when you brought up Louisiana, and I didn't even realize it was that recent that schools were integrated. And I know that wasn't the case everywhere, but in a lot of places
Yeah.
in the South, I think happened the last. So, but it was just I think a powerful moment to be able to listen to that podcast, to kind of hear what he thought and then kind of talk through some of his lived experiences. And talking
Yeah.
about, he I don't know if became friends is the right word, but one of the black students who was on the basketball team, and my dad's best friend was one of the better players on the basketball team. And those 12 students that went to that school, most of them didn't live there. They were like, again, they were brought in because they were good at a specific thing, and so they had to be bussed in from where they were and whatnot. And so my dad was telling me that him and his friend would take this student home, and he lived kind of far away, and if he didn't have a ride, he would have to take multiple buses, whatever. And I don't know, even that, like that student, I'm like, what must have been his mindset to trust getting a ride,
Yeah.
from two white students. And, my dad was saying he wasn't there, he had graduated, but my uncle who was there was saying that the next year when the schools were integrated, it was a ton of like confrontations in the hallways between white students, between black students, and all this stuff. So it's like, if that happened in integration, I can't imagine the 12 students, that were there and the things they were having to deal with and go through on a daily basis, and still be excelling in school and athletics and all those different things. So, but yeah, it was just a cool moment to have with my dad, and I think was important. So
It even got me thinking. You should ask if like those 12 students are still around, just because I wonder if
mm-hmm.
like I would imagine there's like even if there's local news or anything, there could be
Yeah,
some cool stuff to just follow up on. But,
it's a
like
good point.
I imagine like the 12 could have like even just like um build a like strong like group within
Yeah,
like to help resist all of that, just because it was um that was a lot that they had to experience just within Louisiana. But it does speak to like these histories are not super far away,
right.
right? Like
Yeah,
they are right here in our backyard,
one
and
generation
it's
removed.
we're one generation removed, and that's kind of wild to think about. Like it's
Yeah,
like my parents, were born in the '60s, but even then, I'm thinking of like, just being in the South and being a black kid in the South in the '70s, right, and then the
yeah,
'80s, and then just I I I can only just imagine just some of the challenges they had to face while they were just trying to navigate post secondary education, like primary at middle school, and then high school, and then post secondary. Um, I I even think about like for Florida, for example, my coach, my head coach in high school, he went to Florida. He played football at Florida. He also played in the pros. Willie Jackson was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually the athletic director back at PK. But he played wide receiver, played for the Saints. I remember watching him growing up. He was one of my coaches in high school. But his dad was one of the first scholarship players, black scholarship players at UF. Like,
Wow.
which is crazy to think about. Like I was like,
Yeah.
that was my that was he was one of the his dad, my coach's dad, was the
Yeah.
first black man to be put on scholarship for the football program at UF. Like it's
Right.
crazy to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the life that we're living in, and we're right here in this moment. And
Yeah.
it even kind of gives us a space to kind of not only tap into those histories, but to even just do more digging of like, okay, what are our parts, right? Like, what are our
Yeah.
parts of how we can engage now that we continue to do the reading. I think it's having conversations like these. I think it's also like, finding ways to build community, like whatever I think this is an aspect of building that community, but like
Yeah.
even going beyond and like seeing like what are we doing within our local communities, like what am I doing out here? Like I live in Seattle now, and like what am I doing out here to kind of not only stay involved and stay informed, but to make sure that this is not just something I just go to social media for, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. 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 All right. Well, we're at an hour here, so let's go ahead and close out. But man, I loved this conversation. I hope that everyone listening enjoyed it as well. Again, as we've said in the past, we really want to talk about things y'all want to hear about. So if you enjoyed this topic, please let us know. Every month we're going to be doing an episode that we're going to be calling a palate cleanser episode. And we know that, subjects like this can be heavy. And although they're great to talk about, we do know that it is a lot sometimes to talk through them, to learn about these things. And it can be sad, but it's necessary to learn about our history and things like that. But we do want to have episodes where y'all can jump on and just laugh and have fun with us as well. So next week, we're going to do one of those episodes where we tell some funny stories. We just kind of kick back, have fun with y'all. So if there's things you want us to discuss, if there's questions you want to ask us, anything like that, please let us know in the comments, in the DMs. If you know us, text us. And thank you again for joining us in with the new podcast. We'll be back next week. Drop us a follow, share, like, subscribe. We love y'all, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah.